Welcome to the Up Arrow Podcast with William Harris, featuring top business leaders sharing strategies and resources to get to the next level. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey everyone, I'm William Harris. I'm the founder and CEO of Element and the host of the Up Arrow Podcast, where I feature the best minds in e-commerce to help you scale from 10 million to 100 million, as well as help you up arrow your business and your personal life. I'm excited about the guest that I have here today, David Wachs. David is the CEO and founder of Handwrytten, the world's leading provider of automated handwritten notes, used by e-com, retail, and luxury brands, including a $1 billion fashion brand that we'll discuss later. Handwrytten helps its clients engage with their customers on a deeply personal level. We're going to talk about retention over acquisition and how turning your customers, how you can turn your customers into fanatics. David, excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, William. This is a true honor.
Yeah. And I want to give a shout out also to Alex Petrarca, a podcast booking agent. She's the one that you worked with that reached out to me. So thank you very much, Alex, for putting us in touch.
She's amazing. Highly recommend her.
Yeah, that's good. I do want to announce our sponsor. Then we'll get into the good stuff here. This episode is brought to you by Element. Element is an award-winning advertising agency optimizing e-commerce campaigns around profit. In fact, we've helped 13 of our customers get acquired, with the largest one selling for nearly $800 million and one that IPO'd recently. You can learn more on our website at element.com, which is spelled ELUMYNT.com. That said, I want to hear more about your three-step plan to win back customers. I understand there's a good story here, but what is the three-step plan to win back customers?
Number one is to own it. So if you screw up, you have to own your screw up. Number two is to overcompensate for it. So fix it and overfix it. And then number three is never do it again. So I know this for my last company. I ran a text messaging company before this, and we had a large national spa chain as our client. And we sent the wrong marketing collateral to a couple hundred stores, which they didn't think that much of, but for us, it was like end of the world. So we apologized. We flew out to every location, handed them roses and new signage, and promised it was a one-time blip, and then we absolutely never made that mistake again. That's kind of, I could give other examples. There was one very, very early on in that company. I had the circus as a client, and the circus.
The circus?
Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey as a client.
Wow, yeah,
and and they would do have the elephant paint a picture during part of the show, and then you could text in. I forget the full thing, but you would text in. I guess the painting has nothing to do with it, but you would text in to win a family 4-pack to Disney on Ice, which was another property owned by Feld Entertainment. Well, only one winner was supposed to be selected, but that night, it was a very small company at that time, and I forgot to turn on the one client limiter or one recipient limiter, and sent out family 4-packs to every single person that entered. So at the ticket booth, they were overwhelmed with people coming asking for their family 4-pack, and I quickly got on the phone with them and said, I guess my company is buying everybody a family 4-pack, and we did. Wow. And we were very small at the time, so it was a big hit to our revenue. But they became a client for life because of that. They saw that we were willing to accept what we did wrong, and then we overcorrected or corrected in that one case. And never made that mistake again. So plenty of other mistakes, but not that one.
Yeah, well, and I think that's important to call out. On our website, we actually have a section that says we promise to make mistakes. And I have that there specifically because it's jarring and you're like, what do you mean? And the idea is that, if you're moving fast and you're doing something that's groundbreaking or different or new, there will be mistakes that are going to be made. And either the agency or the company you're working with is maybe just too incompetent to realize they made the mistake in the first place, so they think they didn't make a mistake, or they're just trying to bury it. And so our point is, it's going to happen, but we're hopefully going to be the ones who find it, call it out, fix it proactively. And to your point, there's a client of ours that's been with us for years from a similar situation where we made a mistake. but we found it, we called it out, we credited them back before they even had a chance to realize what happened, kind of thing. It was like, hey, we already took care of it. And I think that speaks volumes to creating that situation with the client.
Yeah, being on the other side of the table, my wife and I started a product that was on Indiegogo, and we were working with a marketing firm on the rollout of that product, and they screwed up, and we kept pointing out to them that they're messed up here, and they never once owned it. They blamed us, and I'm fine taking the blame when it's my fault, but having the vendor blame the client when it was clearly the vendor's fault, you lose brownie points real quick. And the problem is, I think millennials or whatever generation people are hiring now often don't know how to accept ownership for things. So we didn't use that advertising firm much longer. It infuriated me. So
yeah. So own it, fix it, and
never do it again.
Don't do it again.
Yep, easy enough.
Yeah. Easy to say, hard to do sometimes. Like you said, you could end up eating a pretty big amount of cost. But when you do that, now I'm curious, you won some of these customers for life, but did it translate into other things as well, where it's like, well, now there's also additionally, they've told other people about you or anything like that?
Certainly in the case of Feld, I mean, we expanded from Ringling Brothers to the ice shows of Disney on Ice, and then also Monster Truck Rally and all their other properties we expanded, which was a big deal for us. In the case of the spa, they just stayed with us forever, so nothing really in that front. But when it came to sell the company, I needed client references, and they came to the table, and they were all willing to glow about us and stuck with us through that transition process, which is always a risk for an acquirer, to know that those clients are going to be there after the fact, and they all stuck around.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing to think about when, there is a cost to doing the right thing, but you do it because it's the right thing.
Yep.
Oftentimes there's also a payback as well for doing the right thing. And you might not always be the case, but in the e-commerce space, one of the things that I think we run into a lot of times would be, you ship somebody the wrong product. Well, how do you handle that? Or the shipping was late, or, a number of problems that can happen with that. But when you take good care of the customer, sometimes people look at this and they say, well, the cost of making the return free is too much for me to handle or deal with. But maybe the cost of not offering the return for free is too much for you to handle or deal with.
Yeah, I think what people, and this is not me, this is Joe Polish, who's a marketing expert. He says this, and I believe it. Every company has a money-back guarantee. It's just, how much are you going to fight with the customer until they win and they get their money back? And are you going to market your money-back guarantee? So, for instance, Handwrytten, my company, would always do right by the client, but we never published we had a money-back guarantee. We didn't make it known to people we had a money-back guarantee. So we're missing out. You should use that as a point of difference, that you have a money-back guarantee, even though everybody does. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. But now, right on our website, it says if you are not satisfied, you get a 100% money-back guarantee. For that reason, we know either you're not happy. What we offer, some people are a little apprehensive towards, so we need to make sure people understand how we understand that. We understand that sensitivity. And we also want to build trust with our clientele. So, yeah, we're putting it out there front and center, because even if we don't, we still have it. So we might as well, use it as marketing.
I think that's brilliant. And so let's talk about this, because I think one of the things we talked about before when we were chatting is turning your customers into fanatics. And so if you treat your customers this way, the inevitability of them not just being a happy customer or a repeat customer, and that's all well and good, increase your LTV, but they become fanatics. What are some examples of customers who have become fanatics for you?
Well, I have a few. I'm going to have a podcast or a webinar and feature him. Tim Sweetman, he's a owner of a couple Chick-fil-A's, and he's running around on his podcast and his his sphere of influence and really pushing us. So you do get that influencer effect. So I was on Brittany Hodak's podcast talking about what we do. And then she really inspired me. I bought her book. I read it. We implemented some of the things from her book, such as swagging out our customers. So if you spend $600 or more with us, we're going to send you like a full swag kit and notebooks and pens and coasters and playing cards and all this stuff, just to surprise and delight. But I also offered
I love that.
her free access to our platform to try it out. And now she's out there on other podcasts and on her weekly, her own show, and she's talking about what we do and how much she loves it. So, it's kind of just paying it forward and doing the right thing. But, we did a survey, which is available on our website, a blind survey of 2,000 consumers, and we asked them if they feel appreciated. And by and large, these consumers said no, they didn't feel appreciated. And then we said, okay, what forms of communication would make you feel appreciated? What would a phone call, would a handwritten note, would an email, a text message? Well, first we asked them what's the most personal form of communication. And they said the most personal is a phone call. And the second most personal is a handwritten note. And then we said, okay, well, what's the most annoying form of communication, or runs the risk of being most annoying? And the number one was phone call, because they're calling you on their timeline. And the least possible annoying is a handwritten note. So if you're trying to run the balance of super personal, not annoying, that's handwritten notes. And then we also said, well, do you feel appreciated by brands? And by and large, they say no. We said, what would make you feel appreciated? A handwritten note from the brand. If you receive a handwritten note from a brand, or if you do feel appreciated by a brand, what are you more likely to do? Well, buy more often, buy higher value, promote more to your sphere, whether it's through online, social, or off. Those are all common, and nothing's really all that mind-blowing, but what people don't think is it's as easy as making people feel heard. And the best way to make people feel heard and seen is through simple acts like a handwritten note, or an occasional piece of swag, whatever it is. Just those little out of the way gestures really mean a lot to people.
And it really is little out of the way gestures. It's not grand magnitude things. But I have to laugh about the phone call that you were talking about, being on your own time and everything. And because this happened just last night. Somebody sent me a text message, and it seemed like something that I should probably, have a conversation about. I was walking back to my car. It was after dinner, and so I'm walking back to my car, and I'm jumping in, and I called them. They replied with, "Okay, boomer." And I kind of had to laugh, because we are at that point where it's like, they're looking for, hey, it's like, just read it on your own time, reply on your own time. Don't call me like this is my time right now. But that is true. So I can see how, the phone call is very personal. It's extremely personal, but it could be maybe not received as well. But the handwritten note being so highly weighted on the personal side, but also the least intrusive. I hadn't thought about that before. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And, obviously we're asking questions because we want to find out about handwritten notes, but the results speak for themselves. And we had a third-party research firm look into all this. They came up with the questions. They analyzed the results. And I mean, it's striking. And I think in today's day and age, when the least used inbox is the one at the end of your driveway, because the average consumer is getting, or the average office worker is getting 124 emails a day, spending 23% of their time just managing their inbox. Before this podcast, I had to sit here and turn off Teams, turn off Slack, turn off Outlook, because the constant interruption, right?
Yes.
I did do not disturb my phone. You're overwhelmed with electronic correspondence, but what people don't get are the old-fashioned things, handwritten notes. I had a guy who knew, I'd assume he knew what I did. I mean, he sent me this big FedEx, and it was like it wasn't a flat, it was like a box. And I opened up the box, and in the box was a very thick card, like greeting card. And I opened up the greeting card, And on the inside of the greeting card was a video screen, and it started playing some total blather. It looked like some corporate video, just the most corporate-y of corporate videos. I couldn't watch it for 2 seconds.
Sure.
But what I thought about was how distracting. Wow, how does this screen work? How much does this cost? If this costs a lot of money, does that mean he's making a super high margin business? He's trying to sell me something super high margin where he's going to make a fortune off my hard-earned money. So it was all the wrong things. And I'm not just saying this because I run a handwritten note company, but I was just like, this is probably a $25 product plus shipping, or maybe a $20 product plus shipping. And it just set the entire wrong tone. You could do something much cheaper. Pick up the phone and call at an appropriate time, or send a note or something, but you don't need to go out of your way with these ridiculous gimmicks.
Sure. Now, I will say that in the lead gen side of things, when you're getting into, bigger customer accounts where it's like, hey, lending an account to you is worth $100,000. So sending a $20 thing is not that much from a customer acquisition cost standpoint. So there are times where I've used some tactics similar to that with other businesses that I've helped grow. But what I like that you called out is that it's like, is that the right approach for the thing that you're selling? And maybe that's not. That said, it reminds me of just that idea. The mail still got your attention. It was still something that was sent in the mail. That was a really big thing. Like you said, the least used one. Did you see there's a meme or something, or a post going around about some guy who, I think he got the job, but basically dressed up like a donut delivery guy, and shows up instead of having, a resume or whatever that he handed, but he shows up basically the inside of the donut box was his resume. So he basically got escorted right into the person who he needed to see. And it was like, hey, here you go. And I'm dropping some donuts with my resume right there on your desk. And it's brilliant because, to a point, emails, texts, all the other things, it's very easy to be overlooked among the millions of notifications that we're getting. But that was hard to overlook.
Yeah. And it's so easy to send. Everybody knows how easy it is to send an email. It doesn't take any effort. When I was in college, so going back 25 years or more, I was trying to get in a job at a venture capital firm. And what I did was I contacted the companies that had alumni that were from my school, and then I sent them a FedEx resume and followed up via email as well, because I wanted there to be a FedEx envelope on their desk 25 years ago. I mean, email was a problem then.
Sure.
I got the job, and then 10 years later, I went out to drinks with one of the VCs there, and he had a friend join, and that friend asked him, how did he get the job? Did he email you his resume, or was it through Monster or something? And Grant knew that it was from a FedExed resume. He goes, no, I believe he FedExed in his resume. So 15 or whatever years later, he remembered that I took the extra effort to do something different to get in front of them.
Yeah. And I think that's brilliant, right? It's just that little extra effort can go a long way. And from what I understand, this happened recently to you in the mall, where you saw firsthand kind of how that little extra effort is impacting people, right?
Yeah. So my company, Handwrytten, we send handwritten notes on behalf of brands. And, you mentioned that in the opener. The client was a perfume brand or cologne brand, and we were sending the handwritten notes after purchase of that cologne, but only on the online side of it. So I walked into a Neiman Marcus with my wife and kids. We were strolling the mall. It was a hot Arizona day, nothing else to do. And we walked into the Neiman Marcus, and there front and center was the cologne brand. So I turned to my wife and I said, oh, we send the handwritten notes for that cologne. And a store clerk ran right over, it's a department store. So the department of just that brand came over and said, can I help you? And I said, oh, no, we just send the handwritten notes. And she said, no, you don't. I have to do that. And I never get around to it. And we started talking. I said, oh, do you do it? She said, no, I never get around to it. I said, well, why not? She goes, well, I'm supposed to send the notes, I'm supposed to merchandise, I'm supposed to sell, and I'm supposed to do the end of day books. How am I supposed to do that all?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the online, we were automating the whole process for the online and sending those handwritten notes right after every sale. And other luxury brand we work with, we handle the offline and the online. So what's very interesting is a lot of these brands now, the online is able to create a much more personal connection than the offline because of services like ours and just having the data and infinite time, because it doesn't take any time when you have services like ours. So I just think it's really interesting that we are forging more loyal connections online most of the time than off. It doesn't have to be like that. That luxury brand is doing it offline as well. So, but a lot of companies, I think, are missing the boat. They're just optimizing their online funnels and not talking about their off.
Yeah. I think that's such a good testimony to how, even as shoppers, we aren't just online versus offline. Everybody buys things online and offline. Well, I can't say everybody. There are some people who don't buy anything online,
Yeah.
right? There's definitely a pocket of people like that. But for the most part, we shop in both situations. And so you want to have that same experience, that same personal connection, no matter where you're buying it, whether it's walking into the mall or whether you're getting it online. And there should be no reason for the online to have such a dominating presence of creating that personal relationship more than the in-person one. And so if there's a disconnect there, then it's how do you get that fixed there?
You know, it's funny. I was just at a conference. I was talking to a very long-running furniture brand. They've been around for at least 100 years, I believe. And we were talking about their online and offline. And they're like, do you believe that our online sales only make up 2% of our business and it's actually losing money? And I said, that's not true. He goes, oh, I know that's not true, but everybody in the organization thinks it's true. And I said, because people use your online store to do their research. And they, go through and they find the chair they like or whatever. And then they walk into the physical store and make the purchase. So that online store is not responsible for 2%. It's probably responsible for 70%, because people do all their filtering online. But it's a great cross-sell. They're then taking that activity, bringing it in the store and sitting on that chair or sofa or whatever. And he totally agrees, and he's trying to get his corporate to agree because they're trying to pull all funding from the online when it's, sure. I think it's pretty, I bought a chair from that company. I know how it goes. So, it's just very interesting how different people kind of miss the big picture of how people think and how purchases are made. And they do have that benefit of the offline, the brick and mortar, where a lot of stores these days don't. So people are leveraging it.
Well, and that shopper journey is changing again a little bit. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Apple Vision Pro? Have you tested it out or anything?
I'm familiar. I have not tested it. Have you? Do you have one?
I have one and I've tested it out, and I have to give some credit to. I've tested on all of the different spatial commerce apps, and the one that comes to mind that you just talked about here would be the Wayfair one. And I actually know the guy who did most of their original AR VR stuff there. Mike, he's actually an investor in another company now as well, another VR company. But he or the way that the app works is, you've got your goggles on, and they have this augmented reality that you could do from your phone, but it's completely different when you say, all right, I want to see this table in my office. And it's like, right. I put the chair, I put the table, I turn around, and it's like, I see it sitting right there in my physical space, exactly the way that it would be. And to your point where it's like, well, maybe I say, okay, great, I want to come pick it up. Maybe it's IKEA or something like that, right? And it's like, I'm going to go pick it up at IKEA. Or I'm going to go pick it up at whatever furniture store. I don't know if Wayfair even has actual retail locations. I don't think they do.
I don't think so.
If they do, I'm not aware of it. But it's changing that journey. And so maybe you look at it there and you're like, okay, I'm going to do a little bit more browsing and I'll buy it maybe on the website, and maybe the AR doesn't end up getting the credit for the sale or whatever, right? But it's like all of these things are leading to the different point where you have to understand how your shopper is discovering, qualifying, and then officially purchasing.
Yeah, I used to go on to entrepreneur podcasts and talk about how you have to think of your online presence or, a SaaS company as a platform, not a website. And I think retailers need to think of themselves as a platform, not an online store, offline store, but being everywhere the customer is. I mean, if you want to allow people to buy that desk through Alexa and say, hey Alexa, buy me that Wayfair desk, or if you want to buy on the VR glasses, whatever it is, you have to be everywhere because it all influences the purchasing decision. Or the company that is everywhere
100%.
is going to have the leg up, rather.
This reminds me then of one of the other things that you and I wanted to talk about, which is developing a consumer communication preference center, the 4 C's that you have for this. Yeah. And this kind of follows right along in line with that, where it's like, where people want to buy, but what about communication? What are the 4 C's for this?
So the 4 C's are content. So what are you saying? You got to think about, okay, is this long form, short form? Is this a thank you? Is this informational? Cadence, how frequently am I going to send content? Choice, am I going to allow people to choose which content or which channel to opt in and out of? And then channel is the 4th one. So do you have SMS? And my last company was an SMS company. Email, obviously, print, handwritten notes, push notifications, whatever those are. So just thinking through, how are you going to touch people across all those channels and allow people to choose which channels and which content they want to receive, I think are very important. So yeah, content, choice, channel, and cadence in any given order.
And the choice is huge because, like you said, while some people might view the phone call as intrusive, other people likely within that survey probably are like, no, I want that phone call. And it makes me feel, loved and appreciated even more. And so being able to have that choice, I think, is a big part of just how do we work towards what's best for each individual person to the best extent possible.
100%. Yeah. And it's not easy. I've seen very few. I see a lot of preference centers, but it's usually limited to email. Do I want to receive just transactional or marketing? Very few incorporate, and maybe 1 or 2 of them include text messages. Very few even do that. So I think there's a real opportunity for brands to think about their preference centers holistically, one that encompasses the 4 C's.
Yeah. Well, and I think, if we're talking about what are ways that we can improve retention over acquisition, because acquisition is costly, right? And that's kind of what we started this topic on is retention over acquisition. Acquisition's costly. Retention then, sometimes there's the idea where you're like, okay, well, how do I retain customers? And maybe it gets a little bit of a thought. And so they're saying, okay, I'm going to do email, I'm going to do SMS. And there's some element of thought that's going on there. Somebody else we talked about on the podcast we had on here, Michael Siegel with Deco created. They create a whole bunch of content specifically for post-purchase, almost maybe more content for post-purchase on how to handle and what to do with things. And I think that that's brilliant as well. But it's just the idea of how do you, if you are the type of company then that is saying we want to invest in growing the LTV of our customers. We want to invest in growing the viral coefficient, which I didn't talk about, the viral coefficient, right? So for every person that ends up becoming a customer, they refer at least 1 more person. But if you want to increase that, these are the types of things, your 4 C's in the way that you're communicating with them, their communication preferences. If you make a mistake, which you will, so not if, when you make a mistake, calling it out, saying, yep, acknowledging it, owning it, fixing it, and don't do it again, right? These are the types of tactics that are going to drive significantly better long-term growth, because acquisition, no matter what you do, is going to become more costly over time for everybody.
Yeah, one example is a client of ours. They're a snack brand, and so the office snacks, they'll send you a box of snacks every month to your office with granola and chips and stuff. And if they screw up, whether that's not deliver your box or deliver the wrong box, what they found was that, they would follow up with a win back box saying, we're so sorry we screwed up. and they'd include a handwritten note. We're so sorry we screwed up. Here's another box of snacks for your troubles. We're truly sorry, and we promise not to let it happen again. What they found was those clients that had the win-back experience. Now, granted, it could be the extra box of snacks and the handwritten note. They had a higher lifetime value than everybody else. That if you didn't have a bad experience, you didn't get screwed up with. So then what they did was they just decided to screw up with everybody, have the win-back experience for everybody, and that raised overall lifetime value because they're which is a little sneaky, but it's a way to kind of raise all boats. So yeah, they were doing that. And for all listeners on the line, I just had oral surgery, so if you hear something, I'm stuttering over my S's here. But yeah, so that's kind of how things are going.
I think first of all, I'm not hearing you stutter over your S's, but also okay, so tangent now. It's got me reminding of like sometimes you get that surgery or you go in and you get the Novocaine or something injected in there. And then it's like your tongue's a little bit like this, and it's like and then you inevitably bite your cheek, right? And then it's like you've got this. It's like, man, that's brutal. So I hope that you're doing all right with that. The idea,
it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. So, but I want to go back to this snack one here because they took this to the extreme where they're not just fixing it on the ones that they do make mistakes. You're saying that they take it to the point where they actually, quote unquote, make mistakes on purpose just so they can do the win back, and that's driving an overall better experience for people.
Absolutely, that's what they're doing, and I think it's brilliant. They've done it. They've been doing it for years, and we hope other customers follow suit or other clients follow suit.
Yeah, and maybe not everyone, right? Like there's a limit to that where maybe that becomes trope as well. But I think it's a brilliant idea. And I'd say that even in my own life, that is true. There are times where maybe there was a mistake that was made. Maybe somebody made a mistake. Maybe it's not even a brand, right? But then you go through that mistake forgiveness process. And it reminds me of a story that I remember I don't remember which company it was, but when I was in college, about a guy who made a $700,000 blunder for this company. And they were interviewing the CEO about, are you going to fire this guy? And he said, why would I fire him? I just paid $700,000 to train him. And the idea there, it's like sometimes with those mistakes, you're not going to make it again. And sometimes there's even more trust going forward now with that.
Yeah. It's a great example of trying to, build trust with clients you might not really know that much about or whatever. But yeah, that's one way they've been doing it successfully.
Yeah. I want to get into a little bit of the backstory here too. So other listeners have heard a lot of my podcasts before. I normally start off with backstory. I'm trying something different this time. Tell me what you were doing that led you to where you've now founded Handwrytten.
So prior to Handwrytten for 8 years and then 2 more, I ran a text messaging company called Cellit. We were providing text messaging services to brands like Toys R Us, Abercrombie and Fitch, IKEA, Sam's Club, Office Max, Blue Man Group, The Circus, and sending 1 million texts a day just for Abercrombie alone. And wow. After 8 years, I sold that company and I spent 2 years with the new owner, a company called Hello World, which is now part of Merkle. And then the day after that rolled over, I started Handwrytten, which basically I was trying to think, okay, what am I going to do next? And I realized that text messaging and electronic communication is great, but just because it's so prevalent, how do you stand out in all this noise? So that's why I started Handwrytten. And I did not take a break. I went straight from one into the other. I would not recommend that. I would go travel the world or enjoy life. But here I am. Prior to Cellit, going back even further, I was living in San Diego. I had moved out there. I was prior to that, I was in Chicago and working for an investment bank in New York, an investment bank in Chicago. I moved to San Diego to work for a venture capital firm and of suspect quality. And within 4 months, I was fired. It rained incessantly in San Diego, which is the best climate in the country.
Wow.
I was in a car accident and I got evicted from my apartment in 4 months. And so I ran from San Diego screaming. But the problem was, prior to that, when I was in New York and Chicago, I was making good money, but I was spending it all to pay down school debt. So when I ran screaming from San Diego, I had nowhere to go because I had relatively little school debt, but I had nothing in my pocket. So I moved back to Arizona, where I grew up, and I started Cellit based on the idea that, and this is before 2008, the big real estate meltdown, but the whole idea was to provide information on real estate over text message. There was no such thing as Zillow. There was no iPhone. So when you drive up to a house and you want info on the house, you'd call the realtor and you wouldn't get them on the phone, but you could now text them. We were the first company to do that, and it would send you back photos of the inside of the house and price and all that, and then the realtor would get a lead. And to date myself, you could even request a fax. So you type in your fax number and you get a flyer faxed to you. But that became the basis of Cellit, and I quickly pivoted off real estate onto big retailers and brands like that, live entertainment. So yeah, that's what started it. And I ran that company. We did not take any funding. We grew profitably. And then 8 years later sold it. It was no $800 million exit like your client there, but it was a fine exit. And then I just used that to start Handwrytten.
So, you've got nothing in your pocket or little in your pocket.
Yeah.
What was the thought process that made you say, you know what I'm going to do with this, that I'm going to start a business instead of just getting a normal job?
Well, I was fired and I was very
Right.
picky. So being fired made it a little difficult to get a job after 4 months.
Sure.
I drove up to San Francisco from San Diego and interviewed at a firm up there, and no dice. And then I was kind of thinking maybe this is the opportunity I needed. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Prior to college, I had my own computer company. I built and sold computers, just to tell you what a nerd I am. This is kind of before Dell's big thing, and we sold mostly to housewives and,
Sure.
and all that stuff. And then before that, when I was very, very little, I used to go door to door selling candy with my little red wagon when I was like 4 years old. And one day I didn't have any candy, so I put the first aid kit in the red wagon, and I went door to door, knocking on
Selling
doors at age
Band-Aids?
4.
Or what are you
Yeah,
selling?
well, no, just saying, hey, is there an emergency going on? And people would answer with no. And I'd say, okay, I'll come back later. And that
You
was
go
it.
incite an emergency.
Exactly. So I've always wanted to start a business, and getting fired was kind of out of desperation. It forced me to find my true calling. So it was the best thing to ever happen to me by far. San Diego was a train wreck, but it was the best thing to ever happen to me.
I love hearing that. I pressed on that because I kind of thought that's maybe where you were going to go with this, and I wanted to get that part out. You hear that so often, that sometimes the best things happen when your back is against the wall and you'd have nowhere else to go except for to go forward through that dungeon that you're scared of. Like, you have to slay the dragon or whatever that's facing you, and you're like, that it's there. But if there's any other option, you kind of want to go around it. But when you don't have a choice, you go through it, and it ends up being one of the best things you possibly could do.
Yeah, it was 4 months of craziness. I mean, the car accident, I'll take responsibility for. That was me.
Sure.
The raining, no. Evicted from the apartment was pure lunacy. And then getting fired, the crazy venture capitalist came in my office screaming at me, saying I sold stock that I didn't even know what he was talking about. And then they offered they were such amateurs. They offered to have me back at the company if I just wrote a letter apologizing for selling the stock. And I just, I'm like, I wasn't born yesterday. I know what you're trying to have me do. So that job quickly ended. and I literally just packed up my boxes and went back to Scottsdale. And then for the next 8 months or so, I sat in a room with a 2-liter bottle of Diet Mountain Dew, stereotypical programmer story. And I programmed at the time PHP code, and I wrote the back end and front end of House for Sale, and then which was the real estate, and then something called Coupon Zap, which became the basis of what Abercrombie used. So that's kind of how it happened. And honestly, that business took off way faster than this one, but
Sure.
different industry, different time.
No, that's pretty cool. We're definitely in the personal side of this now, and I want to get into like who is David Wachs. And one of the things that you said that I really appreciated here. Let's see if you get where I'm going with this. You are getting sleepy, very sleepy. From what I understand, you use hypnotism a bit in meditation to help deal with the stress of running businesses and just life in general. Tell me a little bit more about what kind of meditation and what kind of hypnosis are you talking about here?
Yeah, so it goes back 12 years, 10 years for sure. I was living in Chicago. I was dealing with some anxiety issues that were serious and physically manifesting. I mean, I would break out in rashes. And when I sold my last company, I was in the hospital for a week with literally a twisted gut. My stress was so bad, I physically, somehow my body twisted my gut, and I was in the hospital for a week. But beyond that, just in general, I would break out in rashes and all this stuff. And I started seeing a very kooky hypnotist, and he turned out to be my guru and really kind of changed my life. And now that I no longer live in Chicago, his name's Mark St. Camille, powerhypnosischicago.com, I believe. But I still see him remotely. So we'll talk on the phone and he'll send me an MP3. I'll then listen to that at night for a few nights in a row. And I can only remember the first couple minutes of it. And then I think he's got me programmed to go out to his voice or something crazy.
Sure.
But I'll listen to I'll remember a few minutes of it, and the rest I don't remember. But it's been life-changing for me. And he's a big proponent of meditation too. So the meditation is 20 minutes of sitting comfortably on the floor, typically crisscross applesauce style, and then you repeat the mantra. The mantra that he likes and I do is Soham, which is Sanskrit or Indian or whatever, Soham. And what it means is I am that. And so when you repeat it, I am that I am, I am that I am, you just repeat that over and over, and you breathe in and breathe out and just clear your mind for 20 minutes. And it's been very centering for me. It's been my way of getting clear, and it's really helped me out a lot. And working with Mark St. Camille, I mean, he blows me away. I mean, the stuff that I haven't seen him in person in 10 years, but he remembers so much about you. He must take copious notes, and I would recommend him to absolutely anybody and everybody. It's been the best money I've ever spent in my life. It's
a powerful testimony.
And I didn't believe any of it. I thought it was all malarkey. I'm not what I call a woo-woo person that believes in, afterlife or anything like that, but I 100% believe in his technique, and it's really interesting, and it's helped me out with anxiety, with stress, with rage issues. There's certain people in my life I've had lifelong resentment for. Ironically, teeth, people relating to my orthodontia growing up, and he's really helped me kind of overcome those issues. Relationships, just sleeping better at night. I mean, he's really a guru.
Amazing. And I hope it didn't seem that I was coming across, like making fun of it. I just wanted to have
no.
you are getting sleepy. I'm a big fan as well, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't realize just how much our brains really are. You were talking about coding PHP, how much our brains really kind of are like computer systems,
Yep.
and every once in a while they get stuck in this like loop, and you just almost have to kind of reset it, upload new software so it can kind of move forward past whatever the thing is that it's hung up on.
I think that's why it appeals to me is because I make the exact same analogy to programming. And,
Yeah.
if you think you can kind of get, crack the code to get in there and apply that code, yeah, I think that's why it really appeals to me. And I am 100% a believer at this point.
Yeah, that's really cool. Speaking of mantras, I believe there are a couple of other quotes that you've told me that you have around your office that you really like to live by, that are powerful as well.
Yeah, so when I was in college, I used to bring speakers to campus. So we brought Billy Joel and all these things. And the speaker that he was relatively young at the time, Conan O'Brien. And
Oh,
it's funny,
really?
I have a poster on my wall at home with him, and I was looking at it yesterday. I'm like, my God, he looked young. And at the time, I was a kid, so he looked old to me, but he looks
Sure.
like a baby now. But he came to school, to my university, and he was very thoughtful. And he said, I don't know anything. He was just starting his own show. And he said, if I had to offer you one bit of advice, it would be always get in over your head. And
Mm,
somebody just recently put it a different way, which is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think there's so much truth to that, always getting in over your head. If you don't do something out of your comfort zone, you're never going to succeed. You're never going to do things beyond what you thought was possible. You just have to constantly press yourself.
yeah.
And when I started Cellit, the last one, I would think about it daily. And apparently I'd share the news because the first time I was on the Inc. 500, I was being interviewed for the Inc. 500. And they said, do you have any quotes? I said, always get in over your head. And the woman goes, oh, somebody else said that this time. I said, who? And it was a guy I had told it to. So he owed me a drink.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, so it really just meant a lot to me. The other one that's kind of meaning more to me now and is kind of more empowering, I think, is there's a poet, and I couldn't tell you who the poet is, but he wrote, lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep.
Mm,
And what I take away from that is all the naysayers out there that tell you can't do something, they're sheep. Or your competitors that are constantly being annoying, duplicating your stuff, ripping off your stuff, that type of thing. They're the sheep, and you just have to move forward. You can't get overly entrenched in their opinions or what they're doing. So be that lion and just kind of forge your own path. This
yeah.
actually does get back to some hypnotist advice. One of the parts I do remember before falling asleep on one of my hypnotism sessions was the notion of meeting a lion, and a lion when it's in the jungle, it doesn't just pounce. A lion surveys and it sits there and it determines the right thing to do, and then it pounces, but it's not
Mm.
reactionary. So, I think there's multiple reasons to kind of be like a lion.
Yeah. Well, I love that quote then too. And it reminds me of something, just the idea that understanding the difference between opinions and advice is
Hmm.
kind of core to success, right? There's a lot of opinions that fly around, acting as if it's advice, sometimes well
Hmm.
intentioned, but um, being able to discern whether it actually is advice or whether it's just an opinion, I think is important. And so, to your point, it's like, is that an opinion of a sheep, and you're the lion? Maybe don't worry so much about what that is. I really like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I met a super fan of Handwryttens recently, and her husband is coming out with a product. I have it at home. I need to try it. It's a salt that you cover your steaks in before you grill them. I guess it's an Argentinian method or a Brazilian method. And then you shake all the salt off, and you finish cooking the steak without it. It's supposed to seal in all the juices or whatever. But her husband is getting a lot of flack because of his accent, and people don't think he can start a company. He's got a Brazilian accent, and I don't know, maybe he doesn't communicate well. But I just told her, lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. Share that with him, and she did. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people need to just move past the losers in their lives and decide who's important to listen to.
Yeah. No, I think that's very wise. As a busy entrepreneur, business builder, a lot of people will say that they feel like they, juggle a lot of things at work. But I understand that you mean that not just metaphorically, you actually juggle.
Yeah,
I'd like to know more about this.
Better. No, I mean, you asked me a few interesting facts.
Yeah.
I do find juggling very meditative. I also find long runs, 5 miles or more, meditative, but it has to be the past 5 miles. Once you hit your stride, something, at least for me, something happens after 5 miles.
Sure.
But juggling, same thing. I mean, it once you kind of get in the motion, it takes focus, and you can't be checking emails, and you can't be thinking about other things. You kind of got to get into the groove there. So that. And then, prior to that, I think I'll hit you off on this one. The other weird side of me is before starting my professional career, I went to cooking school, and I did a little bit of that for a while. So I thought, for the same reason, prior to cooking school, I was in a.
I mean, not just any school, though.
What's
right?
that?
Like, not just any school. Like,
no, cordon bleu,
right?
like,
I mean,
France, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was, I went to University of Pennsylvania. I did a double degree at Wharton and the School of Engineering and Computer Science. It was a very rigorous 5-year program. And in those 5 years, I had 2 electives. That was it. The rest of it was work. And those 2 electives weren't even the ones I wanted. But I wanted certain, and I didn't get them. And here I am 5 years later with no electives. But I walked away from that program, and I had a job waiting for me. They didn't want me to start for 3 months. It turned out, so I said, okay, well, what am I going to do for those 3 months? And I thought, gee, I could go to cooking school. I'd always wanted to do that. And I thought the idea of sitting, cutting carrots, chopping carrots for a couple hours a day would be really relaxing. Turned out it wasn't. It was very stressful, but I enjoyed it. And living in Paris was fun. And then I also learned a valuable lesson coming out of that whole thing, which is taxes, because that signing bonus I got that allowed me to go to cooking school. I didn't think about the tax implications, so I came up a couple grand short after everything, but still a great experience. And all it's done, though, is it makes people want me to cook for them. And I try to explain, I'm not that good, and it was a long time ago. The most frequent word the chefs would use when they tasted my cooking was poubelle, which means trash can. So,
he was like the French Gordon Ramsay over there.
Oh, 100%. His name was Chef Guy, and he was a piece of work. He was a very tough guy.
That's good. That's funny. David, we've been able to cover a lot of really fun topics. Drawing it back to, what we started with, retention over acquisition.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you just helped us to walk through ways that we could turn our customers into being more fanatics. If you need to, go back, rewatch the beginning of this. There's a lot of things, and it's not as big of things as you might think. They're just very simple little things, thinking about it from the customer's perspective, and I appreciate that.
Well, William, I really appreciate being on your show. This was the most involved podcast I've ever done. So thank you. I appreciate it. It speaks very highly of your attention to detail and work ethic. I'm actually very impressed. That Alex Petrarca gets me on a lot of podcasts, but few leave me feeling, geez, this guy did his research.
Well, I really appreciate that. If people wanted to work with you, Handwrytten, what's the best way for them to get in touch, follow you, anything along those lines?
Sure. So the best thing to do is learn more about us at handwrytten.com. It's handwrytten.com. You can request samples there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to say I'm active on Twitter or X, but I'm not. But you can find me on LinkedIn, David at Handwrytten, and would love to connect. But really, I recommend finding our samples, seeing for yourself if they pass muster, if they look real to you. We actually have our own, we didn't even get into this, but we have our own technology stack. We have 4 patents approved, that 4 live patents for our robots now, 2 more than when I spoke to you last time, actually.
That's cool.
We
Congrats.
175 robots. Yeah, thank you. And we are, I believe, the largest provider of this in the world, sending for major luxury car brands, everything else. That's kind of what we do.
Well, David Wachs, again, absolutely amazing. Appreciate your time and wisdom here today. And everyone else, thank you for joining me. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Up Arrow podcast with William Harris. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.